How old are you, Steve?
At the time of the sighting, I was probably in my mid to late 30s.
And this happened how many years ago?
I'm believing it's about 17 years ago. This is 2022, so it was around 2005.
And what was the approximate date and time?
I would say early March, between 2 to 3 o'clock in the morning.
I know the location already, so I'm not going to put any of this in the interview, but when you tell the story, do you mind mentioning your background? Like, because it adds a lot of credibility and your expertise, and you know what I'm trying to say. You don't have to say where you worked or where you work now, but just your background when you start talking about this, because that really helps.
Well, my background, I spent about 10 and a half years in the Army, mainly training on the west coast of the United States between Alaska, Washington State, California. Been in places, Oklahoma, originally from Kentucky. So I was trained mainly as an observer, and then also in stealth mode to that when you're out on patrol as a soldier, that you maintain noise and light discipline, as well as being aware of your surroundings and using something called visual purple. And visual purple, it's the way your eyes adjust to the light conditions, especially in darkness. And from the military's experience, when you're working at night or training at night or even doing operations at night, whether you're in combat, you use your senses and you fine-tune your senses of smell, your sense of vision, and your sense of hearing, that you be in the surroundings and you kind of get a feel for what's around you. And that's one of the reasons why I've been curious about this encounter, because every once in a while I'll recollect it in my mind and I'll run through the scenario that I was not drunk, I was not using drugs, no alcohol. It was in the middle of the week. I don't know which day of the week it was. I was going to say it's either probably a Tuesday or a Wednesday, possibly even a Thursday. But late at night, especially if you're driving, you become very aware of your surroundings. There was no rain. There was no sleet, thunder. There was no weather of any kind. And it was a moonless night as well. So that was also an indication that you kind of sometimes strain if you're tired at night. But because I worked at night, I was fully aware of my surroundings, fully aware of my senses. And that as I was driving east along this road, that I saw something on the right side of the road walking in the same general direction that I'm driving toward the east. And initially I thought, well, I don't know what that is. So I just hit my brights on, my bright headlights. And when I did that, almost at the same time, it took a half a step closer to me in that right-hand lane. So it's walking on the side of the road near the guardrail, and then it gets a little bit closer to that white line that runs parallel to the road. And I thought that was curious, so I moved over a little bit, and I'm straddling the orange line, the passing line, and as I continued driving, it just was massive. It was tall. It was wide. It was a dark gray, black, brown color. I couldn't quite describe it. I had seen pictures recently and in the last several years of other people have taken pictures of what they call a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot, and the color looked appropriate to what I had seen. But, my encounter lasted probably 15 to 20 seconds at most observing it. I never saw the front of it. I never saw a good profile, but I did get to see the back of it. And the hair looked like it was matted, but you could kind of see the definition in its muscles. As I said, this thing was massive. It was as wide as my truck at the chest. on its back. The arms on it swung in a different manner than what I've normally seen in people. And just the gait, the gait in which it walked, it didn't walk like a man would or like a woman would. It like earthly, like it was attached to the ground, as I would best describe it. It was just tall. I mean, it was a good foot taller than my truck, and my truck is slightly taller than I am. And I'm about 6'2", so this thing is easily 7 foot, maybe taller. It just, the more I think about it, the more I realize that, you know, this thing has a physicality to it. I spoke to you earlier about this being or creature that I saw, that it's kind of hard to describe it. I mean, if you remember the Patterson-Gimlin film from the 1960s, and they've done reproductions of it, and they've done some digitization on it. They've cleaned it up on video and on the internet and even on some programs. And what I saw looked very similar to what this thing was, except that I did not see the front. I didn't see its face. I didn't see a good portion of its front. I didn't see any of that. I just saw the back of it. And just from what I've seen in that Patterson-Gimlin film, it's almost the same creature. You know, I'm an educated man, very well experienced. I've seen other creatures, bear, seen moose, caribou, deer, elk, rabbits, and it was none of those creatures that I'd seen, whether they're in a zoo or out in the woodlands or out on the prairies of the Dakotas or even up in Alaska on the North Slope. What I saw was not in any animal that I could see in a zoo or in a book. This thing, whatever it is, and it has physicality, that it just seems curious. And I talked with you earlier that I just would kind of want to know and then want to read about other people's experiences to either compare and contrast to what I had seen. So
yeah.
I'll pause there.
Yeah, I will, like I mentioned, when I hang up, I'll send you other reports from that same exact location. Listen to kind of what they described. What is your education?
Multiple degrees. Originally, I was trained, educated as a geologist. So I know something about rocks. I know something about geology, age of the earth, chemistry, physics. I also have a degree in physics. And as I may have mentioned earlier, I'm an engineer, equally good in mechanical and civil engineering, structural engineering, things like that. And I work in the utility industry. So one of the things that the skills that you learn in the military is that you take those observational skills with you, and that you can make a good report about certain things, whether it's safety or the operation of the equipment. So something like this, and, you know, I'd seen raccoons, I'd seen other creatures that get up in the electrical lines and they get electrocuted, and I know the reason why is they're touching bare wires. So none of the creatures that I'd seen killed by electricity compared to this. They're all small creatures. But this thing that I saw 16, 17 years ago was big. And, you know, as big and muscular as it was, it could easily kill somebody or kill another creature like a deer or an elk. And I'd read reports of other people seeing Bigfoot or Sasquatch killing something. And it would kind of seem credible that as big as it was, as strong as it is, it would have to be not only stealthy, but incredibly strong and incredibly quick, as in like a cheetah. So how it move that big of an animal, it'd probably have to do it on all four legs or all four appendages. That you would have to have very long arms that it could use, kind of like a chimpanzee or an ape does, to glide in the air using its feet and its hands to gain that speed, because that's what a cheetah does, that its muscles are defined that it can become the quickest animal in Africa. So a Bigfoot, I would assume, would probably have the same type of ability, as well as its stealthiness, that it could stalk a prey and then possibly stay still for a very long period of time, observing and then just waiting for its prey to get in a location where it could grab it. Because obviously something as big and massive as this thing is would have to have a high caloric intake. Just as, soldiers or military personnel in other countries, they're doing operations 24 hours a day. They need a lot of food. They need water. My background, a variety of things that, if you're going to be operational in an environment like this, you got to have some kind of food supply. And that's what I've learned watching other shows, even though I'm not a biologist or even a paleontologist. But I know something about it that, for high activity output, you need high activity input. So you would need to eat, especially if this is a physical, real being.
I agree. You mentioned it had muscle. Can you describe it? When you were driving by it, if there's no moon, you hit your high beams. It's on the passenger side of your truck, very close to you as you went by it. Can you describe more detail about the muscles and the shape of it?
Okay. Looking at it from the back, bodybuilders like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Lou Ferrigno, they have very well-defined muscles, the trapezius, the deltoids, the back muscle. And one of my best friends, I will call him Mac, his obsession was to build that perfect deltoid triangle, that, your shoulders and then your narrow waist. And this thing, looking at it on the back of it, it had very wide shoulders, very muscular arms on the upper portion, on the deltoids. And then on the back, you could kind of see the definition, even though it had hair on it. You could see those back muscles, and it kind of tapered down to a smaller waist, but the waist was still big because you could see its gluteus, the butt muscles, and they were prominent as well because the leg muscles as well were just massive. And, me being 6'2", maybe 210 pounds, this thing at over 7 feet tall would easily be over 300 pounds, probably closer to 400 pounds, because as much mass and muscle and definition, and I didn't get to see its hands. That's the one thing that I really would have liked to see, because I know its arms looked longer than a normal human's. It looked like its arms hung down, that it was close to its knees. So that would indicate that, it had a different skeletal structure underneath that muscle. But you could just see it, and you could see that it had power behind it. Even though it was walking slowly, or not slowly, but just walking at a normal gait for this type of creature, that the muscles, and you could kind of see the back of the legs on it. You could see the back of its legs, and the muscles there were well defined as well. So it, like an athlete, but not like a sprinter, not like a bodybuilder, just a well-rounded athlete that had muscle, it had definition, it had mass.
Can you describe the gait again?
Yeah, the gait, like a horse's gait. I mean, if you look at horses, whether it's a thoroughbred, a trotter, or a pacer, they train those horses to have different gaits, the manner in which they walk. People, men particularly, they kind of bounce. That, that their arms and their legs will swing, and they flex at the joints, the knees and the elbows, and then the hips and even in the shoulders. The manner in which this thing walked, that the gait was not human. It felt like it didn't bounce up, that it would just kind of glided along the earth. It didn't go up and down. I didn't see any head movement going up and down. It's like a level and like earthly. I mean, the heftiness of it is just weird that, recalling how it walked, I'd never seen anything walk like that, ever, before or since. The only thing comparable, I think, is that Patterson-Gimlin film from 1967 in October, and they only got, I think, 47 seconds on it, and it never turned toward me. I mean, it never turned around, it never made any movement, and never made any sound that I could hear. But I did have both the windows in my truck rolled up. I didn't beat my horn at it either. Instinctually, if I had have beat my horn at it, it probably would have provoked it, or I could have gotten a different reaction altogether. And I think that instinctually I just said, well, I'll just let it be. And that's just the kind of the discipline within me. The manner in which it walked, it didn't bounce up and down. It just kind of like glided along. And other people had said it was like on roller skates. I don't think it was really on roller skates. I couldn't really use that term. I mean, I'd have to see it again and then compare somebody on roller skates or even ice skates. We're not built to be on roller skates. You have to learn that skill. Same thing with ice skates. We're not built to walk on two rails on ice. But this thing, just the natural way in which it walked, like it flowed along with the earth. And I would like to have seen it going uphill. I mean, this was flat, level terrain, gravel on the side of the road with asphalt right where the orange and white lines are. So, just the gait of it was odd.
Yeah, your description is what we received from a lot of witnesses. A lot of witnesses describe the same type of walk. No bob, just smooth, agile, quick.
Yeah, no bob.
Do you remember anything about the head?
It was big. And it, like where the shoulders meet, then the head comes up. I mean, there was just like a small little dip in the hair where I could not discern whether there was a neck. I wasn't really focusing on the head, though. I was just thinking on the back of this thing. Part of the head was probably obscured because it leaned forward a little bit. I heard other people talk about it had a conical structure to the back of its head. I did not see that. But then again, it was dark. I just know that the hair seemed uniform from the head, the shoulders, the back, the gluteus, the back of its legs down to its feet. And I really didn't get to see its feet very well either. Just when it moved up and down, it moved its legs left to right, back and forth.
Tell me again, how fast were you driving?
I was driving between 50 and 55 miles an hour. Probably saw it for at most 20 seconds. Because when it first appeared, I had my low beams on. I saw it, and I turned on my high beams. It slightly moved toward me, and I moved slightly away from it and straddled the middle orange line in the road.
And it was walking parallel to the road?
Yes, it was walking parallel to the road, eastward.
And this was between 2 and 3 a.m.?
Yeah, between 2 and 3 a.m.
No other vehicles
early
on the
March.
road?
No other vehicles. I did not see any vehicles in front of me going in the opposite direction, and there were no traffic behind me. And it was like that the entire stretch of the way.
This area, on both sides of the two-lane road you're on, it's pretty dense forest on both sides in this stretch.
It's a pretty dense foliage and tree coverage, forested area on both sides of the road.
Yes, indeed. I know it very well.
Small homes, country homes left over from decades ago that the people who own that property were able to retain it, and it's still within the families in that area. There is a railroad that parallels this road, and it's probably 50 to 60 feet north of it, maybe more, maybe closer to 100 feet. And it's actually on the opposite side of the creek.
Yeah.
So there is a creek that runs parallel.
Some of my own experiences in that same exact area. A lot of reports, I'm letting you know, I have not published them because I do research there. Like I mentioned, over 3 decades of research, I've got 4 spots that I do my research in Kentucky. That is one of them. I got 3 other ones, different areas, that I protect. So I don't post, but I kind of downplay it, because I think if too many people get in there, they're going to try to shoot one or scare them off. Like this report here, when I share your testimony, I won't mention the location at all. I'll just say this is near one of or in one of my research areas.